Stopping on a dime. Are your brakes up to the challenge? Kyle Bradshaw from Cruiser Customizing here with Mark Johnson from Parts Unlimited for your brake pad tip of the week. Today we're going to go through a little bit of an exercise to learn a little bit more about brakes and how to properly use them.
Well, we've gotten all of the components that comprise your brake system up. Basically what you're doing is moving fluid from your handlebar down to your wheel to apply pressure on a disc rotor.
The one thing I'd like to start with is the brake pad itself, because that's the one thing that people replace most often. That's the biggest consumable when it comes to brakes. Like we have some sintered metal, we've got some organic. What are going to be the differences when people are looking at changing out their brake pads?
One of the big differences that you're looking at with an organic, which is how most brake pads started out for disc brakes. Originally started with asbestos, later on other carbon compounds. You get a nice easy wear on the rotor with an organic. As more performance demands came along, started to see more of a shift to a sintered metallic, and most premium pads at this point in time are manufactured in a sintered metallic.
So Mark, here in my hand I have a GG rated pad and you've got an HH rated pad in your hand. What do those letter designations tell us about these brake pads?
My pad stops better than yours, Kyle. It's a higher friction rating. HH was the next generation after the GG standard.
What would be the stopping characteristics or benefits for going with a sintered versus an organic?
In my opinion, you're getting a stronger bite, you get extended wear characteristics, and you get better heat dissipation. You've got performance upgrades in virtually every respect for usually a very small price increase.
One common question that we often get when people call up asking about brakes is how do they really know when they need a new brake pad?
Well, there are a couple of ways. One of them is you're going to start seeing your fluid dropping in your reservoirs, and if that's getting down towards a minimum line, if you're not leaking fluid, then that's a good indicator that you're running out of brake. The other thing is to inspect your brake pads. They will always have a recommended wear before they're replaced. Find this in your manual, or a number of the brake companies will have this information available to you online. This set is probably getting pretty close. This one, brand new, so you can see a difference in thicknesses right there.
Once you've got the brake pads in front of you, you know you're going to go to the process of replacing them. What are other things that we really want to be able to take a look at while we're in that process?
It's a good time to inspect the entire system. A few things that do get forgotten. Your brake pads tend to run on a pin or pins inside a brake caliper. If those do have or are developing any shoulders or grooves in them, your brakes will perform better with those being replaced. For virtually every motorcycle, they're readily available. They're a very low-cost item that yields an immediate improvement. The other thing, replace your brake fluid. It's always a good idea.
Now, along those same lines of bleeding your brake, you have a properly functioning hydraulic system. Hydraulic lines are, of course, the delivery method from our master cylinder down to our caliper. Now, how would you be able to tell if your current lines are still good or if they need to be replaced?
Well, there's a couple of reasons to change the brake lines. Obviously, in a lot of the cruiser world, it's for a cosmetic purpose. Performance-related item, have someone pull the brake while you have your hand on the line. If you can feel the fluid move through the line, you will get a definite improvement in your performance with the braided steel line.
Now, when Mark says feel the fluid move through it, if you hold the line, squeeze the lever, and you feel it flex and get larger and skinnier as you apply that pressure, you definitely should look at either a new set of lines or an upgrade to a stainless steel set.
That covers it. And I haven't seen a bike yet where it wasn't a performance advantage to have braided steel lines.
Now that we talked about most of the brake pad and brake applying accessories, let's talk a little bit about the rotors. Here in front of you, you have a floating rotor. Let me grab a stationary rotor, and I'd like you to talk about the differences between the two and the effects we can see.
Floating rotor compared to a fixed rotor refers specifically to how the brake disc is attached. On a fixed rotor, as Kyle has in his hand, this is attached directly to the wheel. The advantage to that is ease of manufacturing and cost. The disadvantage to it is under high performance applications in particular, the rotor is not allowed to expand from the heat as easily as a floating rotor. The rotor has a carrier that's attached to the wheel, and then it has usually some type of buttons to attach the rotor, so the rotor is free to move and expand from the heat so that you don't warp the rotor or in some cases give the rotor a cone shape.
While still on the topic of rotors, be it fixed or be it floating, how do you know when it's time to replace your rotor?
Well, the first thing with a rotor, if you can feel that the rotor has high and low spots, it's almost certainly time to replace that rotor.
Swapping out the brake pads is the most simple part of this process. You basically remove the pin, drop the pads out, put the new pads in, and replace the pin. Be it 1 pin or 2 pin, it's really a simple task. Now, probably the more scary part for most people is the bleeding of the brakes.
Yeah, that can be intimidating for a lot of people, but the biggest thing about bleeding the brakes is it requires patience and just a little bit of common sense. If you're using just a hand bleeder, this one provided to us by Mighty Vac, follow the instructions, take your time. You'll feel it at the lever when you really have the system completely bled.
Refer to your owner's manual where you can find out specific bleeding instructions for your particular make and model of motorcycle.
The one thing I'd like to add for anybody changing brake pads, if you're worried about brake pad squeal, every brake pad leaves a small amount of deposits on the rotor surface. So when you change your brake pads, I strongly recommend clean your rotors very thoroughly before you install your new pads, so that you do get all of the remnants of the old pad off of the rotor.
Well, thanks, Mark, for filling us in on some of the need-to-know things about replacing our brake pads. And
glad I could help, Kyle, and hopefully this has helped somebody out there keep their bike safe and have a lot of fun riding it. So one less thing to worry about this summer.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for this week's Cruiser Customizing Tip of the Week. Until next week, take care and ride safe.